Good morning, my dear students. Myself Mohan. Today I am going to teach class 8 chapter force and pressure. So we are going to start with our chapters force and pressure. So first of all, see, in our day-to-day life we are going to influenced with the force. Directly or indirectly we are going to be influenced with the force. Without force we cannot do any activities. So we are going to learn what is force and what is pressure. So how it will be related, this force and pressure. Okay? So let us start with that. So in this chapter we will going to learn that what is force and introduction about the force and pressure. Okay, and also studying about a relation between force and pressure, and also we are going to study that effect of force. Okay, so but we will not going to study about the friction, because in the next chapter the friction will be there in detailed way. We will going to study about the frictions. If it is necessary, I will going to tell that what is frictions, but anyhow we will going to study in the next chapter, that is friction. Okay, so first we will going to see that what is force. See, force means a force is a push or a pull or both. That means any object, if you are going to push or if you are going to pull that a particular object, then we can call it as there that object influenced by the force. Okay, what do you mean by force? A force is a push or a pull, means together, push and pull together, we can call it as a force. Okay, suppose see, if I want to pick the pen, or if I want to drag the pen, if I want to push the pen, so this particular object influenced by the force. Without I am applying any kind of force, I cannot move any object. Okay, so that is what it means, that a force cannot be seen but we can feel. That means what? We cannot see that force, just we can feel. Okay, like if you want to take the example of air, so we cannot see the air, we can only feel that air. Okay, like that. Same way, force also we cannot see that, but we can just feel that. Okay, and observe the effect of the force. We can only that feel the force, and we can observe the the activity through the force. So now we are going to understand what is this push means. A push means a force to be move an object away from our body. Okay, that means what? Suppose any of the things, any object, if it is present in front of us, if you try to move away from your body, and then that we can call it as a push. And pull means if object is moved towards your body, that we can call it as pull. So that push and pull together we can call it as force. We can define in this way: a force is a push or pull of an object is known as force. So now you can see that some example of forces we can see that. Now I will going to show that some example how force will going to be applied in our day-to-day life activities. See, look at here. You can see that the pressing of the switch, suppose electric switch, if you are going to be switch on or switch off, so that is due to the force only it is taking place. And you can see the second one, kicking a ball. Okay, means whenever you are playing a football. Okay, so basically when you kick the ball, that is the ball is moving, due to that the force even applied to the ball. And then you can see that launching rocket. So launching rocket also is a kind of force only it is moving. And next you can see that the trolley, okay, the pushing a trolley is also a kind of force is applied to that. That's why it's moving on. Next you can see that the hammering a nail, okay, this one also because of you are applying a force to an object, that's why that nail is moving inside the wooden block. So you can see some more example for that. Yeah, so some more example like tug of war. Tug of war also you can call it as based on the force only. You can see that the two teams are started to pull each other. So which one is applying more force, and that side they can easily move. And next you can see that raising a flag. Raising a flag is also you can call it as due to that force is applying to that. That is also you can see that example. Next, pulling a box. You can see that in the ice, they are pulling the box. Okay, next you can see that drawing a back bow. Okay, that means that there also you can observe that the force is acting on it. Next, opening the door. Opening is nothing but either it's push or pull of the door. So that is also that influenced by the force. That means the maximum activities in our surrounding takes place due to the action of force. Without action of force, and no activities can be takes place. Okay. So next we will going to understand in detail about that what exactly mean by the force. Here also you can see some more example for the force, like sawing of wood. Okay, and next playing of guitar. Okay, and next you can see that scrubbing the floor, that is also one kind of the force is acting on it. And next, rowing a boat. Okay, so these are all are example of that the force is influenced by the activities. Now, so what do you mean by that? The force means whenever that force is occurring, the force cannot occur in a single body or single object. So whenever the force takes place in the particular event, means at least minimum two bodies or two objects should be compulsory. It's mandatory. There is no possible of single object can exist the force. Okay, whenever the force exists, that should be takes place between two or else more than two. Okay, so that's why a force are due to the interaction. What it means that when it will going to exist the force is existed when at least minimum two bodies are necessary to exist the force. Okay, so now we can see that an interaction of one object on another object results in a force between the two objects. That means anywhere else if the force is influenced, that means minimum two objects are necessary. Okay, that is what it means. That suppose example you can take, you can look at here that in the picture. In the picture it's clearly shown that the person is pushing a car. So now car is in the rest. Now unless until a man is applying a force to the car cannot move that. Now because the car is in the rest. So when you want to move the car, so the person needs to apply the force. Then only that the car can move. Okay. So that we can see that example. So if a man stands behind a car, the car does not move. If he pushes the car, he applies force and the car begins to move in the direction of the applied force. So you can see that the force is applying in the same direction to the car. So that's why that car movement we can see that. Okay, this is the example we can see in that. That means the force, whenever the force is existed, it must have that minimum two bodies or contact each other. Yeah. So now exploring the force. You know that before I am coming to this topic, I will tell you a force equals to F equals to, force means the symbol of force we will always represent as capital F. Okay, and force equal to mass into acceleration, m into a. So what is that? Either you can represent in this way, otherwise m into a. You can write like this. Okay, so either F is equal to m dot a, or else F is equal to m into a. So what is this F? Where F is equal to force, where F equals to force, and whereas m equals to mass. M means mass, okay, and A equals to accelerations. That means a force equals to mass into acceleration. So what is that? F equal to ma means F equals to mass into acceleration. Okay, this is the formula of force. Okay, so what is this mass into acceleration means? Whenever the force is occurred, how much means acceleration means the rate of change of speed. Okay, the rate of change of velocity we can call it as accelerations. So how much you are applying a speed or velocity, changing of speed and velocity to a particular mass, we can call it as force. Okay, that means nothing but a push of something or pull of something, we can call it as force. Okay, now we can move on to that, this one, to the concept exploring the forces. Means if two forces act on a body in the same direction, the net force is the sum of the two forces. What it means, what is this statement is saying that? That means when two forces act on the same direction. So see, look at here. Here the two forces acting on, force F1 and force F2 is acting on the object. This is an object, the block, you can see that, and two forces acting on the same direction. So both are in the same direction. Okay, so what will be the total force? Suppose if your two forces acting on the same direction, what will be the total force about this an object? So you can see that the net force equals to F1 plus F2, because same direction you are applying. F1 is applying some force, F2 is applying some force. So total force is acting on to this object will be, that we can call it as net force. The net force is equal to always F1 plus F2. Okay, so that is what it means. So if you comes to that unbalanced force, what do you mean by this unbalanced force? Means unbalanced force means acting in the same direction combining by addition. Okay, that means it's not unbalanced, because when you are applying force F1 and F2, if it is in the moving in the same direction, so it is not in the balance, it is in unbalanced way, it is moving on that. Okay, that's why we can call it as that is an unbalanced one. Okay, now hope so you will understand. That means whenever, if you are applying some force to an object, either one force or two force, okay, so then the total net force will becomes increases. Okay, that is what net force is equal to F1 plus F2. Next, now you can see that that unbalanced forces acting in the opposite direction. That means first one we are seeing that unbalanced force in the same direction. Now we are going to see that unbalanced force as acting on opposite direction. So combining by subtractions. The net force is the difference between the two forces and is exerted in the direction of the large forces. So what is this second one is? Suppose you are taking an object or a body. Consider this is an object or a body. So now you are applying a force F1 in this direction. So now in the other side you are applying a force in opposite direction. That means the object is there or else a body is there, you are applying a force in opposite direction. Okay, F1 in this direction, F2 is in opposite direction. Now what may be that net force? You can see that now that net force will becomes F1 in this direction, F2 in opposite direction. So the net force will be equals to F2 minus F1. Okay, that means you have to subtract it, because see, this is the pen. Okay, imagine I am applying a force from this finger, first finger on this direction, and another side I am taking this finger, I am applying the force. Now I am applying a force on both the direction, opposite direction. So now the pen will be in the same only. So if you are applying equal force from this right finger and the left finger, so the total it will get subtract now. So that is what that you can see that here, F2 minus F1. Okay, and second one, suppose if force is, if you are pulling this object in this direction, or else force F1 you are pulling that force in this direction, F2 person pulling the force in another direction. Okay, so what will happen? The total net force, again the total net force will becomes F2 minus F1, where F2 is greater than F1. What it means F2 is greater than F1? Suppose in case total force will become, suppose F2 force is more than F1, so then you can write that F2 minus F1. Okay, so understood now? Yeah. So that means also you understand the second situations when you are applying a force in opposite direction, the total net force will becomes F2 minus F1. Okay, that is the formula. Means you can write it. Next, in third case, that is what just now I told you. Suppose if you are pulling the force in this direction, in another person is pulling the force in another direction, total net force will becomes F minus F is equal to 0. That means when it will becomes F minus F is equal to 0, when it will be means suppose this force is and that force both are equal, then net force will becomes 0. Suppose imagine this force will becomes because you know the force we are measure in terms of Newton. Suppose this force will becomes 20 Newton. Okay. Suppose this force will becomes 20 Newton and this force also will becomes the 20 Newton. So what is the total net force will becomes? Total net force will becomes, okay, F minus F. So total is equal to 20 minus 20 is equal to 0. So total net force will becomes 0. Okay. So that is what I am trying to explain here. Okay. Okay. So now we move on to that next one. Next slide. Yeah. So next, effect of force. Now we understood what is force. Now how force is existed in an object we understood, and what will happen when force is applying in the same directions, and we understand that what will happen when force is applying in opposite directions. Okay, that is what we have understood. So now we will going to understand now effects of force. Effects of force means what? When we are applying a force on an object, so what are the effects we can see from an object? That is what we can call it as effect of force. So now we are going to learn that what are the changes we can see that when force is applying to an object. Okay, look at here. Suppose first one, effect of force means changes in the shape of permanently. Suppose see, you can take in means any of the object you can take. Okay, so when you are applying a force to that object, what will happen? The shape of an object may change. Suppose imagine your mother is preparing a roti or paratha something. Okay, so when your mother is preparing a dough, your mother is applying force onto the dough, so that every times what will happen is that dough shapes will going to be changed. Will you agree my point? Yes? Yes, whenever you can observe, whenever your mother is preparing a roti, basically first your mother is preparing a dough. When your mother is preparing a dough, what will happen? She is applying force. Whenever she is applying the force, sometimes it gets flattened, sometimes it will get round shape, sometimes it will get different shape. So that means what? Whenever you are applying a force to an object, either temporarily or permanently, it will change the shapes. Okay, both is possible. In dough, temporary changes is taking place. And suppose this pen, if I am applying a force, it gets break. So that is permanent. For permanent shape changes. Okay, I cannot make it again back into this. Okay, so that means when you are applying a force on an object, the shape can changes. That is what I mean to say. So next effect we can see that. Next effect is when you are applying a force to an object, it changes the shapes temporarily. Temporary means, that means we have seen that when you are applying a force onto the pen, if I break this pen, this is permanent change. When your mother is preparing a dough and different shapes she is making, that is temporary changes. Okay, now we can see that when you are applying a force to an object, stops a moving object or makes a stationary object moves. That means, suppose take a football, putting into the one place. Now what will be the football will be now at in rest. Okay, so I taken the football, I kept it on the table. Now football will be at rest. Unless until if I am not applying a force to a ball, the ball cannot move to that particular place. Okay, now imagine, now I will kick the ball. Okay, if I kick the ball, ball started to move. Okay, how ball started to move? Because I am applying a force on my foot to the ball. So that's why the ball is moved away from the rest position. Suppose sometimes if somebody is kicked the ball, okay, so the goalkeeper is catch the ball. So that means you have that ability to stop. By applying a force, you can also stop the things. So that means what? Any object, if an object will be at rest, by applying force, you can move that object. Or if moving object if you are applying a force and you can stop them. That is what that means. Okay, you have that when you are applying a force and you have the ability to stop the moving object, and as well as if the object is in the stationary, that we can make into a movement. That is what the meaning. Now, effect of force, change the speed of moving object. Yes, of course, take the football. If you are applying little force, the ball will move slowly. The speed will become slower. Suppose you are applying more force, the speed will become faster. Okay, so that means when you are applying force, depend on the force. If you are applying less force, the speed of an object will become slower. When you are applying more force, the speed of an object will be higher. Okay, so it's depend on how much you are applying a force to an object, that much the speed we can expect from that. That means the speed also vary by applying a force. So next one, change the direction of moving object. Of course, yes, that next one, when you are applying a force to an object, direction also is changes. Yes or no? So I am taking a football and I am applying in this direction. When you kick the ball in the opposite direction, it will go in this direction. So in what direction you are applying a force, in that direction the object will be moved. That means by applying a force, direction also will change. So what are that means when you are applying force to an object? What are the things we can changes we can see? We can see that the object shape will going to be changed. That changes may be temporary or permanent. Okay. Next, if object, when you are applying a force to an object, so then what we can see that either object can move from the rest to the movement, or else if the movement object, we can stop by applying the force. That is what we mean. Next, when you are applying force to an object, the speed will going to be vary, either fast or slow. Next, when you are applying a force, the speed also, that means direction also, it will going to be vary. Understood now? Okay. Next. So now we can see some examples by applying the force. What will happen? Stretching a rubber band. Temporary changes, I am telling that shape. Temporary shape changes. Stretching a rubber band. You are applying a force to the rubber band. So that's why that the shape of the rubber band was changed now. And if you are not applying the force, it will comes to the normal position. So this is temporary change. Okay. Now you can see that press a sponge. This is also, you can see that sponge shape is changed. And after that, after applying, means after releasing the force, you can see that it will comes to the normal. This is also temporary change. Okay, that means when you are applying a force onto any object, either shape of an object permanently change or else temporarily change. You can see the temporary examples. Next, squeeze a spring. This is also temporary change. You can see that before means after applying a force, you can see that. So what will happen? It will comes to the normal positions. Next, so some misconceptions. See, many children have the misconception about the force. So we will going to see that what the children have the misconception about the force. A solid cannot be compressed or stretched. So many of the students having that they are coming to the conclusion that the solid cannot be compressed. Only liquid and gas can be compressed. Solid cannot be compressed or stretched. No, it's not like that. Certain solids we can compress, we can stretch also. Like previous example I shown that, like you can take the sponge. You can apply the, why that sponge is a solid, but you can compress. Why we can compress? Inside the sponge there will be creating a vacuoles. That means there is a space is there that it was filled by air. So when you are applying a force, what will happen? The air will get escape. So we can easily compress. And also rubber band. In rubber band also it having a elasticity property in solids, so we can easily stretch. So that misconception is, don't think that all solids can be compressed and stretched. No, only few solids can be stretched and compressed, and rest of all are we cannot compress and stretch. It's depend on what kind of material it is. Okay, so that is what that. So here that you can see that explanation. The shapes of a solid object changes when a force is applied to it, whether it's temporarily or permanently. Example, crushing a can changes the shape permanently. That means whenever you are applying a force to an object, okay, so that means obviously either it undergoes compressed or it will go stretched. So that maybe depends on the changes, whether it will be a permanent change or whether it will be a temporary change. Yes, of course you can apply the, when you are applying a force, 100% solid can be compressed and stretched. Next, so next coming to the types of forces. Now we will going to learn, after understanding that detailed way of the forces, now we are going to understand the types of forces or classification of forces. So in our surrounding, we can the force we can classify into different way, because different situations we are applying the force in a different way. Different forces we can feel in our surroundings. So let us, we will going to see that what are the different way we can classify the force. See, basically the force can be classified into two types. One is contact force, another one is non-contact force. So what is this contact force and non-contact force? When you are applying a force, I told you, whenever that force is existed, that should be takes place between two or more than two. Okay, so that means two objects or more than two objects are compulsory to exist the force. So contact force means what? When two bodies are contact each other, then the force is exerted. Such forces we can call it as contact force. So on contact force are the forces exerted by one object on another when they are in contact with each other. Okay, so example, you can see that contact forces are further classified into muscular force and force of frictions. That means the contact force are further classified into two types. One is muscular force, another one is force of frictions. What is this muscular force? So I will show that some example in the next slides. Just you need to, I will tell you what is that muscular force. Muscular force means when we are applying a force, suppose I am going to remove this cap. That means what? I have to hold, see here two objects, myself I am one body and pen is another body. So now I need to remove this pen cap. So I need to apply a force to remove this. So I am applying by my muscles, I am applying a force. Okay, so this force we can call it as muscular force. Okay, so next, force of friction. Friction means what? Friction means when two bodies are interlock each other. When two bodies are interlock each other, it exerts frictions. Friction means, see, if I am standing on the floor, so that my foot is interlocked with the surface. So that's why I can stand. Otherwise what will happen? Due to the friction I can stand. Due to the friction I can move. Due to the friction you can fix this. That is, friction means when two bodies are interlock each other, that we can call it as frictions. So that means the contact force also exists when two bodies are interlocked. So that is, we can call it as force of frictions. Okay. So I will detail where I will take the example and I will going to explain what is contact force and non-contact force. So now coming to the another classifications is non-contact force. Non-contact force means what? Without contact of two body or two object, they will exist the force. Such forces we can call it as non-contact force. So non-contact force means you can talk about magnetic force. Suppose when you bring two magnets, the magnets are attracted something. Okay, even though when you can see that when two magnets, when you bring closer together without contact anything, two magnets are started to move. How they will started to do the movement without contact with anything? Because these two magnets, they have that some force between them. So that force we can call it as magnetic force. Okay, and electrostatic force means the force is the force is existing between two charges. Okay, so that force we are calling as electrostatic force, And the gravitational force, everyone knows that gravitational force means anything you will throw up, it will comes down. Why? The question is coming to that, why whatever the things we are throwing up and everything is comes down? Because Earth having gravity. So due to that gravity, it's also a kind of force. So that's why whatever we are throwing up, it will comes down. Okay. So now we will going to study in detail about that. What are these types of force? So how many types of force? The force are classified into two types. One is contact force, and the contact force are further classified into muscular force and frictions. And non-contact force are three types. That is magnetic force, electrostatic force, and gravitational force. Okay. Now next, contact force. I told you, when two bodies are contact each other and their force is exerted, such force we can call it as contact force. You can see that a bicycle is running. How the bicycle is moving, we can see that because we are applying a force onto the bicycles. So this is contact force. Next you can see that we are stopping that the bullock cart. Okay, so the animals, we are pulling that animals to stop the cart. So here also we are applying a force to the animal to stop the cart. So this is also a contact force. Next, a person is that in athlete, he is jumping onto the hurdle. So here also you can see that that contact force. You can see that. And next you can see that here also the cart is moving. That the camel is dragging the cart. So that means the cart is connected with the camels. Okay, with the help of muscular force only, it is dragging them. She is using her muscular force. She is jumping, and here the cart is moving on due to the animal force. Okay, here also you can see that animal force. Okay, contact force means the force is exerted between when two bodies are contact each other. Okay, so that we can see that muscular force. Muscular force means using muscles. Using muscles, the force is exerted. That force we can call it as muscular force. Here the person is applying that muscular force. Here also the person is applying the muscular force. Here you can see that animal is applying this muscular force to drag the cart. Okay, here she is jumping in the hurdles. So she is also applying the muscular force to that. Okay, so means muscles, we are applying the force using our muscles. Next, we can see that force of friction. Force of friction means suppose this ball, the football, started to moving that. When you are applying a force, okay, so here you are applying muscular force also. Same way, the football is moving on the floor. How it is moving on this grass? Because the ground is contacted with the football, so that both are getting interlocked. So here that the force is between the football and the ground is frictional force. And same way, the bicycle and the ground, you can see that the wheels are connected with the ground, both are interlocked, so that's why they are moving. And here also the friction is exerted. So what is the frictional force? When two bodies are interlocked, then the force is exerted. That force we can call it as frictional force. Frictional force we can see in the football or moving on the ground and bicycles on the road, that is frictional force. Next, coming to the non-contact force. What do you mean by non-contact force? Non-contact force means when two bodies which are not connected each other and then also the force is exerted, such forces we can call it as non-contact force. See that magnetic force, I will call it as non-contact force. You can see that here two bar magnets are there. So these two bar magnets, if you kept in opposite, same you can call it as, when you put that unlike poles, suppose see north pole and south pole, when you bring, then automatically it will attract it without applying any external force. These two magnets are attract each other, or else when you are connected south and north, then also it will attract it. Suppose when two magnets are put in opposite direction, it will be repel each other. Okay, here also you can see that when two magnets are like poles are put together, they will repel each other. That means you can see that attraction and repulsion, this is taking place due to that magnetic forces. Understood? Okay. So next we will move on to that. electrostatic force. So what do you mean by electrostatic force? Electrostatic force means the force is exerted between two charges. Okay, suppose if you are doing two charges like a positive and negative charges. Suppose imagine take a comb. Okay, just you rub each other. Okay, the static the static charges will going to be produced on the comb, so that when you bring these static charges to that lightweight material, means like a pieces of papers you can bring. So what will happen? The small pieces will be attracted towards the comb. So here you can see that, just say take a comb and scale, you can rub that your body. So when you rub, what will happen? There frictions happens. Due to the frictions, what will happen? The static charges will going to be produces which is formed on the comb. So this makes to attract the small dust particles on the pieces of paper. So this we can call it as electrostatic force. Electrostatic force means the force is exerted between two charges, between charges. Okay, so such forces we can call it as electrostatic forces. We can see electrostatic forces when you comb, after combing your hair, when you bring the comb to the small pieces of paper, it will attract it. Okay.